Crowfather, a short story written and narrated by Ben Connolly. At the beginning of time, on the top of the world, God created the Well of Eternity to help gather and renew the souls of all that were lost, and at the bottom of the world, hidden away from mortal eyes, is the Fountain of Youth, from which all new life springs forth. Watching over the fountain as ever-vigilant protectors are the First Folk, who reside in a grand and beautiful city. And at the top of the world, inside a pit, overlooking the spiraling masses of souls, resides a castle that by the time you are reading this, has already seen the end of one world and the reforming of the next, more times than any alive can remember. Just as the Fountain of Youth is guarded by the First Folk, the Well of Eternity belongs to the being known as the Crowfather in the Castle of Nye, for this is his domain, and within his domain there is no greater power than he. The Crowfather is a giant who wears a cloak made of feathers that are dark as the night sky, has a body of an old yet powerful man, and carries with him a hooked staff that he uses when he walks. In the place of a human head, he has the skull of a bird with eyes so dark that not even the light of the sun can penetrate its dark, dark depths. He walks with a limp and a hunched back. His voice is deep, withered and dry, as if each word is strained. His beak of a mouth does not move. Instead, his voice can be heard within your mind, for when the Crowfather speaks, he does not speak words for you to hear with your ears, but for you to feel with your soul. It is said that the Crowfather was once a mortal man, who, on his deathbed, made a deal with God, wherein it was agreed that the man would be given a list of names belonging to those who had recently died but gotten lost on their way to the Well of Eternity, and it would be the duty of the man to collect these souls. Each day new names would be added to the list, and for as long as the man continued to collect the souls of those who were unable to let go of their mortal life, he himself would be spared, and for many, many years, the Crowfather upheld his end of the bargain. Until, on a day like any other, when the Crowfather attended the grave of a woman who had recently passed during childbirth, the Crowfather stumbled across something he did not expect to see sitting atop a freshly dug grave. Inside a cane basket, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a sleeping newborn girl, who, when the Crowfather peered at her closely, opened her eyes to look up at him. The moment she did, the Crowfather knew that this was no ordinary girl. For when her eyes opened, she revealed a pair of bright glowing orbs that shined like starlight, and for the first time since the deal was struck, the Crowfather brought home someone who was not on his list. Skipping forward many years now, and the baby has grown up. She is a young woman. Her long hair shimmers like silver. Her pale skin is unmarked as if made of fine porcelain. And around her ever-glistening star-like eyes are the dark shadows of one who has never slept. Or at least, not since she met the Crowfather all those years ago. The girl does not eat, so there is no need for food in the castle, and the only other beings that live at the top of the world are the crows that serve under the Crowfather. Each and every one of them is bound to the Crowfather in order to help collect souls. As the sun rises each day, the crows fly out across the world to collect the souls of the departed that do not appear on the Crowfather's list, and in the silent, empty hallways of the castle, the girl is left to do as she pleases. But if you would allow me but a moment to tell you about their time together, dear reader, it would be highly appreciated. And I hope not too confusing for you, as we wind back the clock a little. But I feel for you to understand the girl, you must know her full story. When she was still a baby, the Crowfather would take the girl with him across the world in a bassinet that hung from the hook of his cane, swaying back and forth as he staggered with each step. As a child, when she no longer needed to be carried, she would hold onto the free hand of the Crowfather, and the two would walk together until eventually the little girl was old enough to stay home unattended. To pass her time, The girl sits by the well of eternity, talking to the souls that swim among one another, listening to their stories. The souls swim, spiraling downward through the world until they are reborn again from the fountain of youth. But as they wait for their time to descend through the core of the world, where their experiences are shared and redistributed among one another in order to create new lives, they stop for a moment, entranced by the bright light of the girl's eyes. Some take a moment to even stop, sit, and talk with her. Her voice is soft and steady, with never a hint of judgment or condescension, simply curiosity, to hear what those that take the time to sit with her on the hard, jagged rocks that line the well of eternity are willing to say. Growing up listening to the souls of all those from around the world, the girl speaks all languages, and there is nothing she enjoys more than talking with the souls about their lives, listening to their hopes and their dreams, hearing about their achievements, and all the things that they wish they could have done in their time when they were still alive. Some that come to her have left their families and friends behind, knowing that they too will live good, full lives, whereas others come and speak with the girl, filled with fear of what lies ahead of them. Most of those that come to her are scared due to their actions and fear that they are now damned to suffer until the end of time with no means of ever redeeming themselves or having a happy afterlife. But as they talk, the girl listens. She questions them about their choices, their motivations, and what they would do differently if they had another chance. Sometimes the two will sit together for what feels like weeks or even months at a time. And in some very rare instances, the two will talk for what feels like a lifetime, until eventually the soul that was once riddled with fear and regret is now quiet and calm. On the days when the girl does not visit the well of eternity, but instead wishes to traverse the land of the living, she dons her robe, which was weaved together by the Crowfather himself as a gift to the girl. The robe is a prized possession of the girl's. It is long and drapes all around her, with a hood that hangs low over her face, concealing it. Each thread represents a forgotten dream or lost memory, so that should a mortal ever witness the girl, they would quickly forget or assume it was nothing more than a trick of the light. You may, in fact, have seen the girl before, but were unaware of who she was. Maybe she was the shadow on the wall at night in your room that vanished when you rushed to turn on the light. Perhaps she brushed past you, causing a shiver to run down your spine. Or it is quite possible that it was her who was watching you when you thought you were alone, yet could not help but feel as though you were being watched. If knowing this makes you feel uneasy, then please, dear reader, I hope you understand that she does not mean you any harm or ill will. It is simply that she loves the living world with all of her heart, and at times feels so very lonely. For in the castle of Nye, the Crowfather is often busy, and though he thinks of the girl as the daughter he never had, he has always kept her at a certain distance. She often hears the Crowfather making his way slowly through the echoing halls of the castle, the slow, steady beat of his staff against the cold carved stone, followed then by the heavy, dragging sound of his shambling steps. Sometimes, when the Crowfather returns from a trip away, the two cross paths and have a small conversation. The girl might ask how the Crowfather's trip went or how he has been, but the Crowfather's answers are always short, and he never dares look her in the eye. This manner in which the Crowfather treats the girl is not new in any way, and should she ever need him, he would be there for her. For example, one of the girl's first memories is of a time when the two had ventured out together to a distant land, where at the time one of the most destructive volcanoes in history was erupting. Thousands upon thousands of lives were lost to the destructive power of Mount Vesuvius, the ground quaking, liquid fire spilling forth, and a rain of ashes falling like a poisonous snow all around them. The girl and the Crowfather stood together overlooking the city, The crows that served ever so faithfully to the crowfather worked frantically as countless lives were lost. The girl held tightly onto a single finger of the crowfather's enormous hand as tears rolled down her cheeks. Unable to look away from the destruction, her eyes as sharp as they were bright, she watched the faces of each life turn to horror before one of the crows swept down and snatched the soul from their body. "Crowfather," the girl uttered, soft as a whisper. Her voice was trembling as she spoke. "Why can't we help them?"
"We will," the crowfather stated.
"But why can't we help them now?" she asked as a cracking sound filled the air, as though God had decided to split the heavens open above them. "They are suffering."
"No, child of mine. They are dying," the crowfather corrected her.
"But this isn't fair," she complained. "Some of these mortals have not yet seen a single summer. How can we let this happen?"
"It is not for us to decide."
The crowfather's head tilted upward, and the girls followed.
"It is not our right to judge who will live and who shall die. We are merely here to ease the passing of the souls, just as the crows do their job of carrying souls. It is ours to ease the pain of those most damaged and lost."
The girl lowered her head, and the crowfather gently placed his hand on her back, ushering her closer to him, where she held him by the leg and watched on, wrapped warmly under his cloak of feathers, until eventually the world was once again silent. Whenever the girl's heart felt as though it were an iron weight in her chest, she would think back to that day, and for years after, when she sat with souls by the well of eternity that were lost on that day, she understood that, though she may not have been able to save their lives at the time, she was able to help them here and now. But that was a long time ago now, and the world since then continued to evolve and grow. The crowfather continued to get busier and busier, and he was frequently gone for weeks at a time, only returning for one night before leaving again with the rising sun. In the middle of what had become one of the busiest times for the crowfather and his crows, the girl set out to help ease the suffering of those who needed it most. It took her a long time to finally reach her destination, and by the time she had arrived, the worst of the suffering had ended. Pits of bodies were dug as mass graves. Those that could help were covered from head to toe in clothes so as to not catch the plague, and doors had been marked with either red or black paint in order to help identify which houses belonged to those most diseased. The girl wandered the streets, trying her best to find those that needed her most, when by sheer fate and chance alone, she noticed dozens of crows flying through the streets of the city out towards the farmlands. And there, waiting by the fence of a farm, stood the crowfather, patiently watching as men in armor set the house ablaze, and from the inside voices began to scream. "I regret that I could not have been here sooner. If I had been, I might have been able to assist you in the crows," the girl said as she reached out to gently stroke the head of a crow that rested nearby on a fence post. The crowfather did not look at her, but his head turned instead to the nearby barn that had already been destroyed. As the farmhouse burned and the men walked away, the crowfather took slow, steady steps towards the barn until eventually stopping before what remained of a horse. He reached down with the hook of his staff and pulled forth the memory of a large mare whose coat matched the pale skin of the girl before leading it over to her.
"For you,"
he stated.
"Treat her with the love you show all things, and she will always take you to where you need be."
"Thank you," the girl replied, gently stroking the side of the mare's neck as the crowfather nodded and then turned to enter the burning farmhouse. Returning home, the castle of Nye was now home to not only the crows, the girl, and the crowfather, but the horse she had named Demise. Just as the crowfather had stated, Demise did indeed take the girl wherever she wished, and often took her to places that she did not mean to go, but would later discover it was where she was needed most. Having Demise help lift the weight of her heart, however, the Crowfather was now rarely home, and when he was, he would spend his time locked away in his room, looking out over the well of eternity. From the castle grounds, the girl could look up and see his bird skull head vacant of all expression as always, and his eyes empty of all emotion, forever watching the masses of souls slowly twisting among one another. His distance worried the girl, and with each passing year the Crowfather withdrew further away from her until eventually he avoided her altogether. No longer did she hear his staff on the hard floors of the castle, and it had been so long since she had heard his voice that she had all but forgotten what it sounded like. Eventually, the girl grew frustrated with the Crowfather, and for a long time now it had in fact been her that was visiting the souls of those that needed most care. With her shining eyes she saw what needed to be done in the world. With the assistance of Demise she was able to traverse the world, and with the help of the crows collecting souls, the domain that once belonged to the Crowfather now served her. Finding the courage at last to confront the Crowfather, she pushed on the locked door of his room to find that it moved freely, and swung open to reveal him, standing on his balcony, as she so often saw him doing from down below. One hand on the rail, the other holding onto his staff.
"Daughter of mine,"
the Crowfather spoke, his voice as lifeless as ever. "Crowfather," she said with her head held high, "for too long you have abandoned your duty. Was it not you who said that just as the crows do their job, we must do ours?"
"I did,"
he replied, clutching his staff tighter.
"Then why have you not done so?"
she demanded.
"Why have you forsaken your deal with God to spend your days hiding away at the top of a tower looking down on those you would not go forth to help?"
"Leave me, girl."
The Crowfather took slow, heavy steps towards an armchair that rested by an ever-burning fireplace. When he reached the chair, the old man all but collapsed into it, a puff of dust bursting from the cushions, the hulking frame of the man sinking into the feathered cloak. And still he refused to look at her. His vision was transfixed by the flames before him.
"No,"
the girl said with conviction in her voice.
"I will not go. You will tell me why you have not left your room in an age, and you will answer my questions."
The girl strode forth, and mustering all the strength that she could find, she yanked at the Crowfather's chair, barely able to twist it and look at him in the eyes to find that from the empty sockets of the bird's skull there was a slow, steady stream of tears that dripped down the bone and evaporated before reaching the cloak.
"I am tired,"
the Crowfather said.
"I am so very tired. I spent an eternity alone, watching over the world. I am so glad that I need not worry about the afterlife and what awaits me. I was more than content to live out the rest of my existence alone with my crows until the day I met you."
The girl kneeled down before him and clutched both of his enormous hands in her own smaller ones.
"Crowfather, what do you mean?"
The Crowfather took a deep breath.
"When I was alive, I lived a boring life. I achieved nothing and left no mark on the world. My family had already died. I had no children, left no legacy, and I spent what little money I had on myself, satisfying my own selfish desires. I never cared about the world, nor the people I existed alongside within it."
The girl gently stroked the old man's hand as he wept and spoke to her. Looking down, she now saw that the Crowfather's once strong hands showed his age. The skin now stretched thin and wrinkled.
"All that, however, ended when I found you all those years ago. A stillborn child, put to rest atop the grave of her mother, was abandoned by a grieving father, who then walked into the woods with a rope, soon to be collected by one of my crows.
The Crowfather continued.
You are the child born of death who appreciated all things about life. In all my years of existence, I have never met someone who I cared for more than you. And it wasn't until I did that I discovered the one thing that I feared more than death was not having you in my life.
But you shut yourself away from me. I thought that you no longer cared, that the sight of me offended you, and that is why you never looked at me.
She tilted her head to the side, watching the Crowfather carefully.
I did so in hopes of saving myself, dear daughter,
the Crowfather replied.
I hoped that by distancing myself from you I could return to how I once felt. I no longer looked at you because when I looked into your eyes, I saw a light at the end of my darkness that made me feel that I was ready to move on.
Then why didn't you, Crowfather?
The girl asked gently.
Because I knew that you were not.
I do not understand.
I knew that when my time was over, someone would need to take over my domain to help the mortals, control the crows, and watch over the well of eternity.
His head slowly turned to look at her.
I know now that my time has come, for this land now serves death, and that is what I name you.
Stunned, the girl now named Death sits in silence, staring at the Crowfather, unable to comprehend everything she had just been told.
I know what I must do,
his voice weak and broken.
But I am afraid.
Death stood slowly and helped the Crowfather rise to his feet. The two looked at each other for a moment. The dark, empty, void-like eyes of the Crowfathers consumed the ever-radiating light from Death's. He stepped forward, and Death tucked herself in under his arm to support him as the two walked together through the echoing halls of the castle as they once did so very long ago. As they walked, Death spoke with the Crowfather and listened as he told her about the details of his life, his joys and his regrets, his successes and his failures, the love that he once had, and the love that he had lost. They walked together and they talked together until finally, by the edge of the well of eternity, the Crowfather had told Death enough, and no longer had anything to say.
Are you still afraid?
Death asked as the two of them looked at the well before them. The Crowfather gave a small sigh of relief as he took one last glance at the bright light in her eyes.
Not anymore.
Death smiled at him and slid out from under his arm. The Crowfather turned to her and held out his staff, which she took and held in her right hand, its long hook resembling that of a sharp blade. He then removed his cloak of feathers, folded it twice, and placed it down upon the hard stone, before sitting down on the edge of the well and taking one last look at the setting sun.
Dusk always has been my favorite time of day,
he said softly. Death turned her head to where he was looking.
I've often thought that some things are their most beautiful when they're at an end. Wouldn't you agree?
But there was no response. Turning her head back to look at him, the Crowfather no longer sat beside the well of eternity. Now he was somewhere among the other mortal souls that circled the well, waiting for his time to be reborn, and all that now remained of the Crowfather was his feathered cloak, as dark as the night sky, the skull of a bird, and his hooked cane that now belonged to Death.